Hi there folks, and welcome back to Ukes with Alex. This is the ukulele channel where in the past we have explored the wider world of the ukulele and ukulele culture. We've had guests from all around the world and we've generally just tried to absorb as much knowledge as we can about this instrument that we all love along the way. And this week we're going to look at a ukulele string brand that many could argue is the most popular string brand not named Ukulele. We're going to look at a ukulele string brand called Worth today. Now, many of you will have heard of them, many of you will have tried them, but pretty much everyone out there, myself included, have questions about the differences between different models, different strings, and which one is right for them. Because Worth, whether it's something that's been translated from Japanese to English and got lost, or whether it's just the wide selection, very wide selection of strings that they make. There's actually more than you can see on camera. There's another row. They just have so many different options, and I would say 80% of the players out there only really need to know about 4 different ones, but there are so many different ones. We're going to run through all of them. So I guess the first thing we need to do is probably tell you what those 4 sets that you need to know are. So I'll tell you them now. The first one you need to know is the Worth CMs. The Worth CMs are the clear medium string, and they are suitable for soprano or concert players. The length of the string inside is 46 inches, which is 2 strings. So you cut it in half when you use it, and every pack that you buy comes with a spare set that you've cut yourself to length and put back in the packet. The Worth CMs clear medium are on the brighter spectrum, which we need to kind of look at too. Worth come in 2 different flavors. You've got brown and clear, and the browns, the BMs, stand for brown medium. So clear medium and brown medium. What's the difference? Well, clear medium are brighter. They are slightly more resonant, slightly more modern sounding. So when you see somebody with a bit more of a flamenco style play to their strum, then the clear string is more suitable for that kind of thing, and we'll go into the differences between them shortly. Whereas if you're a mellower player, someone who's a bit more traditional, someone who likes a softer sound, then the browns will be right for you. And there is a slight difference in diameter between the 2 mediums too. The brown ones are a hair thinner than the clears, and that tends to work very nicely for somebody that wants a softer touch to how they play. The other 2 strings you need to know about are the BTs and the CTs. So same thing again, but the B and C stand for clear and brown, the T stands for tenor. So you have the clear tenors, the brighter, more modern sounding, slightly more attack heavy and confident sounding string, and then you have the BT, the brown tenors, which are the mellower option of the 2, suitable for jazzy players, soulful players, people that don't want the ukulele to maybe overshadow other accompanying instruments. They want a more textured, darker sound. One is not better than the other. You'll find that different tone woods like these different strings differently. And the ukulele that we're going to demonstrate today is my own Southern Ukulele Store UKULELE model, which is a cedar top with mahogany back and sides. We've used that on our other string comparison video, so you can use that as a reference point. We're going to give the CT and the BT a play for you now and see if you hear a difference. Okay, now that you've heard the main difference between the standard gauges of Worth, Clear and Brown strings, let's explore just a bit more in depth the other material strings available. We're going to start with the Browns, and the first one we're going to look at is the BEs. The BE strings are very similar to the standard tension soprano concert strings, but the high G is a slightly thicker string. The diameter is increased from a 0.0224 to a 0.0244, which once again is probably only a hair's difference, but if you're somebody that strums down in quite a rich, quite sharp motion, then that thicker high G will change the overall kind of tonal spectrum of the set of strings. If you're somebody that has a ukulele with a slightly wider nut width cut from a low G and you want to go back to a high G, then this would be a good option. So that's the BEs. Next up, we're going to look at Worth BLs, which stands for Brown Light. Once again, this is a soprano and concert set of strings. It's slightly thinner than the BMs and the BEs that we've just talked about, so these would suit somebody that really needs a light string to the touch, somebody who's a delicate player that can really kind of only handle the first position chords well, or somebody that needs to do string bending would perhaps benefit from these lighter strings too. These are the lightest of the strings that Worth produce, followed shortly closely by the CLs, which we'll talk about later on. But yeah, for a lighter string, go for Worth BLs. Next up, we have Worth BS, which is a tenor set of strings. The BS strings are a slightly denser string than the Brown tenor standard strings that we've listened to shortly earlier in this video. The BS strings would suit somebody that needs a traditional Hawaiian sound, but perhaps with more volume and more punch. They are still a mellow string, but having the slightly harder core and slightly harder touch response, you get a slightly more expressive sounding string, not necessarily quite as dark as the normal BTs. Okay, and last up we have the Worth BFs. The BF stands for Brown Fat, and these strings are just that. They are slightly thicker than the Worth BT strings. If you're somebody that likes nylon strings, say perhaps somebody that plays a kamaka, something that has black nylon traditional strings as standard, the Worth BFs will have a similar diameter to those strings. They will feel more familiar. Sound-wise, you'll find that the Worth BFs have a mellower, slightly more absorbent sound. So if you're a finger picker, you might find you get less sustain from the BFs, but if you're a strummer, you get a very fat, very rich, very laid back sound. It sounds like me. The BFs, and many of these come in a low G variety, so to just clear that up for everybody there, if you see the term BF and then you see BF-LG, the LG stands for low G. For some people, this is absolutely self-explanatory. For other people, looking at a sea of different skews from different Worth strings, that LG can be the thing that confuses you. Don't be confused. If it says BF, it's high G. If it says BF-LG, it's low G. Okay, so you've just heard the Worth BF strings there being played, but before we move on for good, let's talk about the more obscure strings in the Brown side of the Worth catalogue. You have Worth BBs, which are a standard gauge of baritone strings for DGBE strung low G. That contains an all unwound set. There's no wound strings with Worth ukulele strings at all. They are all unwound, and the Worth BBs are one of the few true all fluorocarbon baritone sets out there for baritone standard tuning. Next you have Worth B6, which is for 6-string tenor ukuleles, not baritone 6-string ukuleles, and that's something that often gets confused, because if you think B6 you might think baritone 6. It actually means brown 6, and it's for tenor 6 strings. And then finally you have Worth B8, which stands for brown 8, for tenor 8-string ukuleles strung GCEA, and that set once again is all fluorocarbon with unwound strings, low G, high C, low C, double E, double A, not a baritone DGBE set. Worth do not currently produce that set. Okay, we're going to move on now to the Worth clear strings. The clear strings on the whole can be described as having a more modern sound. They are brighter, they are more transparent. You hear more of the natural nuances of the tone wood with the clear fluorocarbon strings than you do with the brown. The string doesn't colour the sound and darken the ukulele up quite so much. The first one we're going to look at of the more obscure varieties is the Worth CEs. Now the Worth CEs, much like the BEs we looked at earlier on, are a standard soprano concert high G set with a thicker high G. The high G on a Worth CM set is 0.0224, and on the CE set it's 0.0244, so a hair's difference. Most people wouldn't notice it, but if you're somebody that strums and you want something that has all the punch and the added emphasis on that high G string, which suits many types of music, then the CEs are a good choice for you. Following on from that, we're going to look at the Worth CLs. The Worth CLs are clear, light strings, and they are once again designed for soprano and concert ukuleles. If you want a modern punchy sound, but you want something very light tension, something slinky that's not going to hurt your hands if you're a new player, or somebody that, say you have arthritis or you're suffering from other issues and you're finding the ukulele a bit hard to play, which many of my customers do, I often recommend the Worth CLs to them. The whole set is lighter, it's thinner, it's just a slightly mellower sound than the other clear strings out there as a result, but still punchy and still has a very transparent, clear tone whilst being thin enough for a less able player. Next up, we have one of my personal favourite Worth strings to recommend. This is the Worth CDs. Now, I believe that the D in CD stands for dense. So these are clear, dense strings. They are hard tension soprano concert strings. They pull the neck quite a bit tighter than your average CM strings. And if you're somebody that can play with a slightly higher action, or somebody that plays very precise notes that need a lot of sustain, and you don't mind having a bit more resistance on the instrument when you play it, then the CDs are a fantastic choice. I myself have used the CDLG strings on a Miller concert ukulele that you can find on this channel further back. They were my favourite string choice for that ukulele, and the CDLG set, as low G sets go, is one of my favourite soprano concert low G sets to recommend. Worth CDs, hard tension soprano concert. We're going to move on to the tenor strings now, and we're going to look at the Worth CF strings. CF stands for clear fat. They are a thicker, mellower sounding clear string. They still have more brightness and depth than the average Worth Brown strings, but they lack some of the mellowness and the complexity of the sound. The CF strings are kind of a paradox in that they are very bright and very punchy, but also very, very mellow. These strings suit very individual kind of players, and I recommend trying them at least once if you're into chopping and changing strings. then finally for the tenor strings, we're going to look at the Worth CHs. The CH string stands for clear hard. They are the same diameter as the standard clear tenor strings, but they are slightly harder tension strings. They are just a bit more resilient, stronger and punchier. If you want the ultimate high tension flamenco style string, going to be Worth's most suitable choice for that. They do sound a bit like very high quality guitar strings in my opinion, and I think that's probably where the inspiration for it came from Worth. Okay, and before we move on for good today, I think we should look at the other thing that completely bamboozles people about Worth strings, and that's their low Gs. So for the brown and clear sets, you'll find that any standard, let's say BMLG, BTLG, doesn't matter if it's soprano or concert, all of those low G strings have the same diameter. They are an unwound fluorocarbon low G. But in recent years, Worth have tinkered with that idea of the low G and introduced a slightly different alternative to it. So if you buy a set of Worth CTLGs, you get the standard low G. I think it's a 0.358 string. It's thick, it's quite dense, it's quite traditional sounding, and to combat that, they produced something they call the LG HDs. Now these are only available from us currently in packets and not individually, but if you looked at a CTLG set and then you looked at the CTLG HD set, you're getting a harder, HD stands for harder tension low G on that particular set. So if you're a finger picker and you don't play particularly hard, you'll probably be fine with the Worth CTLGs or its many variants. But if you're a player that needs the string to absorb a bit more of the attack when you strum, then the LG HD strings would be suitable. I haven't talked about clear baritone strings. You have the Worth CBs as well as the Worth C6s and C8s. These are all, the CBs are designed for baritones. The Worth C6 and C8s are clear 6 and 8 strings designed for tenor 6 and 8 string ukuleles. I think that's all of it. I'm sorry that I couldn't do sound samples of all of these, but to be honest with you, I'm just not made of money. It would cost me several £100s to buy all of these strings. I'm hoping that the 4 sound samples that I've provided you with today give you a good reference point to jump off on and pick the right Worth strings for you. But if you do have any questions about Worth strings, you can contact me at my ukesofalex@gmail.com email address, or please, if you enjoyed this video, why not subscribe to my Patreon? You can also contact me on Patreon. I tend to reply to messages on Patreon a bit quicker. And finally, if you want to talk to me about ukuleles or the Southern Ukulele Store, sometimes the lines get blurred between these two channels. You can email me about ukuleles at alex@ukulele.co.uk. In the meantime though, I am just about done with ukulele strings for one day. I will be back very, very soon with a comparison video of the rest of the strings available from Southern Ukulele Store very soon. Please check out the D'Addario string comparison video and the Aquila string comparison videos I've done in the past. Have a good day, and I'll see you soon.